I'm going to give you 3 anecdotes of what I learned from who I think are people who are the best at what they do. And I have been very fortunate to be very close to them and learn those things and put them as the values or the founding pillars of Newslaundry. So, chapter 1 is don't be intimidated, be irreverent. So, this is around 95. I was a researcher for a news show called News Track. It was on VHS tapes. Many of you won't know what VHS tapes are. And later on Doordarshan, there were no 24-hour channels then. And my boss was, for my generation, she was the Amitabh Bachchan of journalism. Many of you don't know her. But my generation, everybody knew her. And she comes from a very wealthy and privileged and powerful family in Delhi. And in Delhi, every wealthy, privileged, powerful family knows each other. But she also ran this news organization, which was part of the India Today group. She's also the founder of India Today. And I was in office one day, and there were no 24-hour channels, and we used to work well into the night often. And there was this halchal happening, ki there's some police action, it involves a rich and powerful man. Camera crew bhejen ki nahi bhejen. Un dino 2-3 camera crew hote the. Doordarshan ka hota tha, News Track ka hota tha, News Tonight ka hota tha. So I, as a researcher, when you're young, you shut up and carry tapes. You don't give any valuable inputs or tippanis. So I was just observing. And the senior most journalist said, why don't you just call Madhu? Now, why we had to call Madhu was because everybody knew that this person was very well known to Madhu and her family. They often attended the same do's and parties. Delhi, there's a particular group of people who are very powerful. So the senior most called Madhu and they said, Madhu, this is happening. Should we send a crew? So she says, of course you should. Why would you ask? She says, because he's kind of sort of your friend. So she says, how does that matter? You're journalists. Do your job. Don't be intimidated by power. Be irreverent. So that was lesson 1. Be irreverent. If, as a journalist, you're intimidated by power, you're useless. So that was my first lesson from someone who I think is the best at what she does. Lesson 2, just before I quit my job in India, I was sent to Bombay. And lots has changed in Bombay, but one thing hasn't changed, that in 1991, a young journalist could not afford decent housing here. In 1999, a young journalist could not afford decent housing here. And that still is the case. So a very well-known writer, director, lyricist, shared his home with me for the months I was here. And it was a lovely bungalow in Pali Hill. And I was like, Koche, chandi ho gayi ye to. So I would go, and it was a very hard life from 9, 10, 11 in the morning when I left to when I came back. It was punishing. But once I came back home, I was pampered by his staff. I was indulged by him. I had an amazing few months and very comfortable. Weekends were spent usually playing chess or lounging around, and I would observe him very often. He would sit like clockwork every day, every morning. He had a fixed schedule. He'd go to his desk and he'd write. Then he'd stare into space. He had a habit of doing that. Then he'd write. Then he'd read. He had stacks of books. Then he'd stare into space. Then he'd write. And he had a pen and he would write right to left. Because that was the language he was schooled in. And I knew he had just finished a prominent Bollywood film, and it was over because the director used to come over often. So I had the privilege of also being in on those conversations. So I said one day, Babuji, what are you working on? He says, I'm writing. I said, what? Is it a play? Is it lyrics? Is it a film? Is it dialogue? So he says, no, there's no project. I'm writing. I'm a writer. So it's what I do. It's my job. I write and read every day, whether I have a project or not. Because that's what a writer does, that's what I know, and that's what I love. So that was lesson number 2 for me. Discipline. No matter how great your talent and how mighty your genius, without discipline, it's useless. Gulzar Saab is 19 years old now. He still lives right here. He's coming. I'm looking forward to seeing him. It was always, and even now at the age of 90, when I go and see him, he's there doing what writers do, which is write. Chapter 3, Lesson 3. This was around 2002. I had quit my job in 99. I started a production house with my co-founder. There was not much work we had then, but we had a digital camera and we had Final Cut Pro version 1 and a G3 Mac, which was a big deal back then. Now I think Final Cut Pro 10, 11, 12. I don't know what it's on, right? But we had no work. So I was shooting a documentary film in a village called Bhikampura in Rajasthan on water. And a young civil servant who had just quit his job, it's around 2002 or 2001, made a very impressive speech. It was very heartfelt. It was very powerful and convincing. And I was quite moved by his speech. So after his speech, I went and met him. We became friends. He came to Delhi. We met on and off a few times. And he had no money, and he was doing a lot of work in right to information and the laws of transparency. And I had equipment and no work, and I had learned a lesson, discipline. If you're a filmmaker, just having a camera and editing equipment is not enough. Make a film. I had no work, he had no money, but he needed films so that he could go from basti to basti, mohalla to mohalla, slum to slum, showing films on CDs mein dikha dete hain un dino, and screens on right to information, transparency laws, accountability, government accountability, etc. His office was in a small slum called Sundar Nagri. It was one room with a chatai and two plastic chairs. And I also got involved, and we kind of founded an NGO together in 2004-05. Now, sometime around 2006-07, the government of India and the Prime Minister proposed amendments to the Right to Information Act, which would completely destroy the Information Act. And a democracy where you don't have the power or the authority or the right to question those who govern you is not really democracy. You know, lining up every 5 years in a tamasha is not all that democracy is about. It's about accountability. So we were sitting and everyone was very, you know, just the entire political activistic community was very upset. Itni maar dhad, you know, jaddo-jahad ke baad Right to Information Act pass hua tha. They're going to amend it. That's the end of RTI. So he had 4 volunteers who worked in the NGO. There was his other friend and co-founder, him and me. And we were sitting on the chatai with this smelly drain outside his office. And he said, we have to block these amendments. So I looked at him, I said, we bole to? I said that 7 of us who together, our power will not be able to get the drain outside repaired if it breaks. He says, we as in we. So long story short, because the 12 minutes I have to tell the story, in 6 months, about 5 to 6 months, there were dharnas, there were gatherings this size, half this size, quarter this size in every locality, Delhi. I knew Palash Sen, Euphoria performed a little rock concert in Jantar Mantar so that young people come and hear the song and then you quickly sneak in a message. Lots happened, and basically 6 months later, the amendments were withdrawn by the government of India because he made such a noise all over Delhi. A few months later, 7 years later, he led another agitation which caught the imagination of the country. And I used, you know, because I was a co-founder of the NGO, I was not a full-time, that wasn't my calling, that wasn't my passion. I like playing football, I like doing other things, but I just got rolled into it and it was exhausting. And I remember it was really, really hard because each time he thought we had made progress, the government of the day would, you know, go back on their words. So 2 prominent politicians at the time who did not know him too well laughed into a camera and said, "Itna hi shauk hai कानून बदलने का तो चुनाव लड़के आ जाओ." Well, in about 5 years, he had finished that party in that state. And it's the youngest party to have a national party status. Now, one may not agree or disagree with the politics of people who you can appreciate and learn things from. But the purpose of these 3 anecdotes and stories is the following. That when you instinctively feel you are close to or have the privilege of being in close proximity with to observe people who you think are the best at what they do, you can always learn something from them. And that is a better training than you will get anywhere else. And Newslaundry is an outcome of the 3 pillars, the values that I learned from these 3 people: irreverence, discipline, and audacity. Have the audacity to take on the biggest battles, even if your less ambitious friends laugh at you. And the value I bring to it is hope, because without hope, nothing is worth doing. And like I said, luck is a very important outcome of any pursuit. So the other disciplines and learnings are what you bring. Luck is how people respond to your labor of love. And we've done our bit. Now it's up to you. Thank you for calling me. Thank you for listening to me. Goodbye and good luck.